What I'm going to be talking about is the human side of the human-dog relationship and what it reveals about both our relationship with dogs and also about human nature generally. The field of study I'm going to be concentrating on is called anthrozoology. And anthrozoology is the general term for the study of human-animal interactions. It's a field that's about 30 years old. It's an incredibly interdisciplinary field. The people that go to our conferences some of them are veterinarians, some of them are psychologists, some of them are social workers. It's also very international. There's people virtually all over the world. We're interested in lots of different things. For example, some of the issues that I'm interested in, you can see, are pretty diverse. Why do humans and only humans keep pets? It's a controversial statement, but which I'm willing to back up. How do we live with moral and consistency? That is, how is it that we can love animals so deeply and at the same time love to eat them with equal gusto? How do men and women deal with animals, and are there gender differences in how we deal with the creatures that we live with? And some topic that we've been talking about a little bit in this conference is what are some of the physiological effects of interacting with animals? We have a scientific society, the International Society for Anthrozoology, and we have a journal, Anthrozoos, which is a really good journal, and you should take a look at that sometime. Dogs are America's most popular pet. There are actually more cats living in the United States today than there are dogs, but in terms of households, there are many more households that contain dogs than contain cats. The importance of pets in our lives really cannot be overestimated. For example, just a couple of weeks ago, there was this poll that was done I saw it in USA Today magazine, where they asked people with had significant others, if you had to leave either your significant other or your pet, who would you leave? And 40% of people said, my significant other is going to go because I'm going to stick with my pet. 65% of American homes include a companion animal. 90% of pet owners think of their pets as full-fledged family members. This is sad to me. 40% of married women say that they get more emotional satisfaction from their dog than they do their husband or their kids. And 56% of pet owners agree with the statement, I would not sell my pet for $1 million. And at this point, what I usually do is show a picture of my cat, and I say, I would sell her for $1 million. And if anybody's interested, see me after the talk. Not everyone, however, is a dog lover. And you sometimes see these statements that you can see here, dog people versus cat people, who's more outgoing and more intelligent. That was in Life Sciences, but you see these things in things like Time Magazine, Huffington Post all the time. And the question is, are there really differences? First of all, how many of you in the audience here and in the Twitterverse consider yourselves dog people? So if you're at home watching on the internet, raise your hands. You didn't raise your hand. How many of you are cat people? 2. That's 3. 3, 4. That's pretty good. Now the question is, are there differences between cat people or dog people? And research says yes, and you've probably seen these studies. And a lot of these data come from studies that idea that we've heard from already today, the Big 5 personality inventory, Big 5 personality test. So studies show, and some studies by some very good researchers like Sam Gosling at University of Texas have found that dog people are more extroverted, conscientious, agreeable. A new study found that dog owners tended to be more conservative, more socially dominant, and more competitive. On the other hand, cat owners have been found to be more open to new experiences, more liberal. Sorry, dog people, but you're dumber than cat people, according to these studies. And that cat people are more neurotic. Now, what does this actually mean? So what can we really tell by knowing if a person says that they're a dog person versus a cat person? And my answer is not very much at all. And I've been warned not to step out of this box, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to break the rules. And the reason why I'm saying it doesn't matter very much if you're a dog person or a cat person is related to these overlapping graphs. So there's a concept in psychology, in statistics called effect size. And something can be significant in a statistical sense, that is to say, not due to chance, but it can still not make a very big difference or have a very big effect. And this is what we see with a lot of these studies. So for example, let's take a look. Here, I'm going to step out of the box. Okay, so here we have these bell curves. You've all seen these before. And this is the bell curve and this is actual data for agreeableness on the big five of cat people versus dog people. And you can see that dog people tend to be more agreeable than cat people, and you can see that by these vertical lines. These vertical lines are the means, in this case for dog people, in this case for cat people. So, are dog people different than cat people? Yes, they tend to be more agreeable. But note the most important thing is look how big the overlap is. So, the variation within cat people and dog people is much greater than the variation between cat people and dog people. And we see this over and over again. So if we have two people, let's say we had a dog person named Dan and a cat person named Camille, and all we knew was that Dan was a dog person and Camille was a cat person. And we were then to predict, well, Dan's a dog person, therefore he's more agreeable than Camille, the cat person. We would be wrong 45% of the time. So in reality, we cannot tell very much about knowing whether people are cat people or dog people. So for example, with political attitudes, Time magazine did a survey and they found that dog people were more conservative. But when you actually looked at the data, cat versus dog person explained less than 1% of the differences between people and political attitudes, even though the headline said dog people are more conservative. So don't take too much from that. Whoa. In recent years, we've seen what's been called the humanization of pets. And so now we have phenomena of not only with people dressing their pets up in these humiliating costumes, I might add, but also having rites such as birthday parties and even weddings for their pets. And I have not seen dog TV, but I bet it's pretty interesting if you're a dog. So we're treating dogs and considering them as they are in fact actual people. Now, humanization has moral consequences. And one of the ways that psychologists and philosophers study moral thinking is through a little thought problem called the trolley problem. And what the trolley problem is this. I'm going to give a simplified version of it. Is you're in a situation where there's, for some reason, 5 people tied to a trolley track. And there's a runaway trolley streaming down the trolley track. And you're this person at the top of that bridge. And there's a fat person there. It's always a fat person, by the way. I don't like this, but they always, I guess because the fat person's got to be big enough that you can push them off the bridge and stop the trolley. So the question is, what should you do? Is it permissible to push the fat guy off the bridge to kill 1 life in order to save 5 lives? And there's all kind of, what if the person you're going to push off is Hitler versus, Mother Teresa? There's various ramifications you can do. And in an experiment that I wish I had done but didn't, Richard Topolsky made an animal version of the trolley problem. And I want you to be thinking about this. So in his version, you have a bus headed toward a dog and a person, and you can only save one. You can run out in front of the bus and you can save either the dog or the person. And the question is, would you save the dog or a foreign tourist, a hometown stranger, a distant cousin that you hardly ever see, your best friend, your grandmother, or your sister? And remember the question. You see a bus headed toward a dog and a person, you can only save one. What do people say? So you ask them, would you save the dog over the person? What you see is that about most people say that they would save the person rather than the dog. But it does depend on how closely you're related. So 14% say that they would save the dog over a foreign tourist. And it goes down to nobody's going to let their grandma die to save a dog. Now, if you change one word on this thing, you get a different pattern of results. And what would that word be? You change it to my dog, in this case, I'll say their dog, and all of a sudden, 40% of people say that they're willing to let a foreign tourist die in order to save their dog. Now, I'm not saying that they're actually going to do this, but they say that they would, and that says volumes about our relationships with animals. And again, once again, you can see you get down all the way to these people are willing to throw their grandmother under the bus, I worry about them. This is another area where we can look for gender differences, by the way. And who's more likely to be truly horrible and throw a person under the bus to save a dog, a man or a woman? A woman, by a long shot. So what we see is that there's a large sex difference. Women in this case are in blue, men are in red. As you can see, women are much more likely in every category to save a person, a dog rather than a person. So, well, how did this happen? How did we get to a point in human history, in our cultural life, in our psychological life, where we have humanized animals to the point where we consider them family members, we consider our friends, and we would actually, at least say that we would save our pet over a person? Well, it's a great example of what we were talking about in our panel yesterday evening, which was gene-cultural interaction. And what I want to do is I want to talk about the biological aspects of the development of this relationship, and then I want to talk about the cultural aspects. So as with everything in biology, it starts with evolution. And I'm not telling you anything right now that you all don't know, but dogs evolved from gray wolves. The minds of dogs and the minds of people evolved together. So there's Brian Hare, who's well known for his studies of cognitive abilities of dogs. And research done in his lab here at ASU and many research facilities around the world now, dogs have a special ability to understand human gestures, pointing, emotional expressions, and so on. Adam McClosey's team in Hungary has shown that dogs can imitate complicated human behaviors to a degree that I find mind-boggling. And some dogs can pick up language very quickly. So this is the famous chaser, John Pilley's dog, who was trained to recognize 1,000 words, arbitrary words for the name for a toy. So you could say, go get the gilch, and chaser will get the gilch in one trial. So this phenomenal connection that we have with these creatures. Well, here's what we don't know about the origins of dogs. We don't know when it began. Some people will tell you 14,000 years ago. Some people will say 35,000 years ago. There's a difference between the archaeological evidence and the mitochondrial DNA evidence. One of the classic example, the first real evidence of a deep connection in the archaeological record between a person and a dog is this Israeli burial site. I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but where that arrow is pointing at is what appears to be a puppy that was buried with this old woman. We don't know where it begins, and there's papers that come out, it seems like weekly, saying that there's different sites of the origins of dogs. Some say the Middle East, some say Southeast Asia. A couple of weeks ago, a paper came out that said it was in Siberia. It may have happened at the same time in multiple places. We don't really know. And the other thing we don't really know is how this event occurred, how these events occurred. And Ray Coppinger, as probably many of you know, has sort of argued that basically wolves tame themselves. But what we do know is that dogs look, as Catherine talked about, early dogs looked like these natural breeds. So when you put the dogs in the garbage dump and they're able to sort of randomly breed themselves, they tend to wind up with these features: medium-sized, perky ears, short hair, often brownish, but as you can see from her slides, often a wide variety of colors. But sometime in probably a couple, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, people began selecting, whether intentionally or unintentionally, selecting for functions, and simple functions like hunting, guarding, herding. And so you had the development of breeds which completely took off until at some point we get the most variable creature on Earth. And there's a Great Dane weighing 200 pounds, Chihuahua weighing 2 pounds. And by way of comparison, this is roughly the difference between little old me over here and this bull elephant. So the morphological changes that we have brought out in dogs have absolutely been astounding. And really, in a very short period of time. So presently, there's probably pushing 500 different breeds of dogs now, distinct breeds of dogs now. But most of these breeds are less than 200 years old. So we have this sort of, genetic sculpturing, as it were, of the basic wolf. Well, at some point, we begin selecting for cuteness. as exemplified by this Yorkshire Retriever, Yorkshire Terrier. And what these cute dogs do that we selected for is they release our parental instincts. And so we have this adorable lab puppy, and we find him so adorable. And usually if I'm in a big group, what will happen is when I show that picture of this, people inadvertently, without knowing it, almost always women, interestingly enough, And why? Is it's the same releaser, it's the same set of stimuli that we see released by the features of human infants. And of course, Walt Disney has made use of this in the development of images of animals in entertainment that we find absolutely adorable. So let's take a little quiz now. And which one is the cutest? And those of you that are watching this worldwide, you can Twitter your response to Julie Hecht at SPARCS 2015. And here's the test. Which is cutest, the cat, I think that's another little lab or little golden retriever, the German Shepherd, or that King Charles Cavalier Spaniel? Okay, you ready? You have to raise your hands or clap or yell. This is like the old Queen for a Day TV show where you yelled for the woman who had the most pathetic life. But we're going to yell for the cutest creature. How many are yelling for the cat? Two, a couple. How many are yelling for puppy? I didn't say clap, I said yell, but okay, that'll do. How many are clapping, yelling for the German Shepherd? Okay. And how many for the King Charles Cavalier Spaniel that looks like Lady and the Tramp? Okay, the winner is clear. I did a count, and it was the puppy. And this is exactly what John Archer found in his study. And why does the puppy win? It's because puppies have these baby releasers, which is what we have bred them for. So we have this biological substrate. But could sexual selection also be involved in our interactions with dogs? And two French social psychologists in an experiment that I also am so jealous of, was like, why didn't I think of that? They recruited this handsome guy, Antoine. They actually had like 10 guys, and they had women judge the hottest guy. And this guy won the hottest guy contest. So they used him as the model in the study. And his job was to go up to young single women in a Parisian mall and say, I'll try my French here, bonjour, je m'appelle Antoine. And then that's the end of my French. And then he would say, I've seen you walking by, I find you attractive, I'm busy right now, but would you be interested in going out and having a drink with me later today? And if so, please give me your phone number. Now, the independent variable was, there were two, was the condition. And so in one condition, Antoine walked up to the women, randomly selected, and asked them for their phone numbers. In the other, he was accompanied by this dog, Gwendu, who, unfortunately, a dog's nickname was Doudou, which has a different meaning, apparently, in French than it does in English. So in the other case, he walked up to these women with the dog. And the question was, would women be more likely to give him their phone number when he was with the dog? And the answer was not only yes, it was an astounding yes. When he was with Doudou, he tripled his hit rate with these women. So it is at least possible that sexual selection might be, he is increasing at least potentially his reproductive potential by being with the dog. There's other possible reasons why evolution might have favored our relationship with dogs. And that is that they may have an impact on our health. And this is a widely held view. And you see articles like this USA Today article all the time. It doesn't say having a dog. It doesn't say does having a dog. It says having a dog does improve your health. Marty Becker, celebrity veterinarian's book, Healing Power of Pets, harnessing the amazing ability of pets to make and keep people happy and healthy. Well, do dogs actually keep us happy and healthy? How good is the research on this? What does the research show? Well, here's the good news. Some studies show that pet owners have better health, and there's a long litany, and you can read this list: lower blood pressure, lower rates of depression, lower stress, fewer doctor visits, they feel less lonely, higher self-esteem, improved sleep, they're more physically active. It's all good. Now, when I was writing about this for my book, what I did was I started looking at all these papers. I had 3 piles of articles on my floor, on my office floor. And one was this pile, which was the papers, the journal articles, which says dogs are good for our health. But then I started coming across these other articles. So then there was a pile that said there was no difference. And then there were a series of epidemiological studies that was pretty high, which found that dog owners are worse off, that dog owners are more depressed, they're lonelier, they're more likely to have panic attacks, chronic tiredness, that they don't sleep better, they sleep worse. They tend to have obesity, ulcers, migraine headaches. 85,000 people a year in the United States alone are taken to hospital emergency rooms because they fall because of tripping over their pets. And there is no evidence that as a group, pet owners live longer than non-pet owners. So I'm not arguing that dogs are bad for people. I'm simply saying that they may be good for some people, but they're not good for everybody, and that the literature here is way more mixed than the media reports would have you believe. So biology has impacted our relationship with dogs, but I'm increasingly convinced that culture is even more important. And take, for example, the Kiambu people of Kenya. I've got a friend and colleague who's an anthropologist, but he's also a member of he was born in Kenya, is a member of this tribe. And he told me that the Kiambu language has no word for pet. They don't have any pets. Now, they do have dogs, but the dogs have a function. The dogs are guard creatures. What they do is they chase animals out of their gardens. They keep strangers away. And I said, Nyaga, do you let your dog in your house? And he said, like, no, never. I said, would you let the dog sleep in your bed? And it was like, I ask you. His response was so visceral. It was like, what, are you insane? Let my dog sleep in my bed? It was like somebody had said to me, hey, here's my pet rat. You're going to sleep with him tonight, okay? And that was the way Nyaga responded to the idea of sleeping with a dog. It just was not going to happen. Well, that's one case, but there's also an anthropological record on this. And 2 anthropologists, Gray and Young, did a wonderful article that appeared in the journal Anthozoos, where they took 60 randomly selected cultures from the human area relations file, and they looked at the role of pets in these cultures. And almost all of these cultures, people had dogs. But in almost all these cultures, dogs had functions. So in most of the cultures, as Jeremy talked about today, his wonderful talk this morning, they were involved in hunting. In some cases, they were involved in defense, scaring away strangers. Other types of work, such as herding, waste removal, they served as sort of biological, kitchen waste, disposal units, for kitchen waste. And only 3 of these cultures did people treat dogs the way that we treat dogs, that they played with them regularly, that they treated them like members of the family. So the way that we think of dogs is not the historical norm. In fact, it's an anomaly. Now, it's an anomaly which has spread rapidly across cultures, but it's an anomaly just the same. And what we know is that there are huge differences in our relationships with animals in different cultures. So for example, about 20 years ago, there was a craze for beetles in Japan, for giant rhinoceros beetles. And this continues today, where you can go to pet shops and you can buy basically little cities for your pet beetles. We think of dogs as pets. In other countries, it's seen as something to eat. So for example, next week is the major dog meat festival in China. And each year in China, about 10 million dogs are killed for the meat trade. These are dogs in a Korean dog meat market. They also sell pet dogs in the same market, but they have different names. This is the category here is called Narangi. And they have different color cages, and they sell them in different parts of the market, but they have meat dogs and they have pet dogs. And there's sort of a distinction between there. So we have these large cultural differences. In the United States, it turns out that widespread pet keeping has not been the historical norm. Indeed, it's a relatively recent phenomena. And one of the most Coolest things that Google has developed, I think, is a little program which you can just download. You don't even have to download it. You can just go to Google and type in Ngram, N-G-R-A-M, and up will pop this thing, and you can put in concepts, names of people, names of events. And what it does is that it looks at the relative frequency that that word or phrase appears in books over the last 200 years. So Google has digitized something like 10 million books, and they have 4 or 5 billion words digitized. So what I did, and you can look at changes in the frequencies of books over time. So what I did was I put in the term pets. And this is the Ngram for the term pets in the United States in American English. And as you can see, pets are pretty low profile, and the term pet only begins to show up on our cultural landscape as defined by words in books, basically after World War II. So you see this giant increase, dramatic increase in the frequency of which pets are part of our cultural landscape, really in the last 50 or 60 years. So it's a fairly recent cultural phenomenon. And I've been studying this as a cultural phenomenon. I've been studying pets as basically a form of fashion for several years now, because I was able to get a really amazing data set from the American Kennel Club. The American Kennel Club was founded in 1884. It sets the standard, the breed standards for the recognized breeds, of which there are close to 200 now. And what the AKC gave me was the registration statistics for every recognized breed of dog between 1927 and 2005. So my data set is the biggest data set, not in the history of anthozoology, probably the history of all of social science. So I have 60 million dogs in my data set. If you have a purebred dog registered with the AKC, and you had it back then, it's symbolized in a way in my computer. So what my colleagues and I have been doing is we've been using this this AKC data as a way of modeling how attitudes and choices in pets have changed in the last 60 or 70 years in the United States. I think we've uncovered some pretty interesting things. So for example, here's a shift in the human-dog relationship. And that shift is the explosion of interest beginning right after World War II in owning a purebred dog in the United States. And what we see is that there, between 1944 and 1997, there was a 20,000% increase in the number of American Kennel Club registrations. And I think this is due to a common cultural phenomena where people in the middle class, the growing middle class in the United States, are emulating the rich. Back around the turn of the century, when the AKC got started, pedigree dogs were a rich person's hobby. And what's happened is that after World War II, this transmitted into the middle class. And so we have this huge increase in purebred and purebred. Well, we can learn stuff about this. And what I'm interested in is whether or not there's been a shift in dogs from function to fashion. So one of the things we've done with this data is we were able to examine shifts in the growth trajectories and the popularity of breeds. Now remember, what I'm doing is I'm using this as a model system. So it's a way of sort of using mathematics to look at how we make decisions about the pets in our lives. All right, here's an absolute winner, probably the most successful breed of dog in the American landscape, Labrador Retriever. It began taking off in the 1960s. But note that the growth of labs, up to the point where the AKC was registering 200,000 Labrador Retriever puppies a year at the height of their popularity. And what you can see here is the steady growth, a very steady growth of the popularity of this breed over time. Now, this is not typical. Here's a more typical thing. This is a loser. I don't know anything about Irish Water Spaniels. I think that's a pretty cool looking dog. But notice, whereas the numbers of labs are in the hundreds of thousands, these guys are in the hundreds. And they've never gotten out of the hundreds. They're still in the hundreds. They're still in the loser pile. And most dog breeds are in the loser pile. They have never become popular. And I'm not going to talk about it today, I don't have time, but basically what we argue is that most shifts in breed popularity are really the result of random chance, like a lot of forms of popular culture change are. And here's the graph that changed my life. So I'm graphing, I got all this AKC data, and I'm doing, I don't know what to do with it. All I know is I can draw graphs on Excel. So here's the graph that changed my life. I've been doing social science now at this point, for 40 or 50 years. And I've never seen a graph like this. I've drawn them as a pretend thing, for students. Here's our bell curve. But I've never seen actual data like that. This is the rise and fall of the popularity of Irish setters. And this is the graph that I took this graph and I went running up and down the hall in my office, showing all my colleagues, look what I found, look what I found. And they're scratching their head like, I don't get it, I don't get it. But what it shows is this incredible fact. Now this is 70,000 behavioral choices that people make. And then they suddenly change their mind and they fall from popularity. Now the interesting thing is that the exact same graph models certain other cultural phenomena. For example, baby names. So, for example, this is the girl's name Jennifer at about the same time. And you can see what happens is Jennifer Aniston, she was born just about the time Jennifers were taken off, is that popularity of baby names rise and fall just like the popularity of dogs. And so I was able to contact some researchers that study the mathematics of cultural change using baby names, and they have taken my dog breed data, and we've done a lot of research using it. I'm going to talk about some of that now. So here's 11 dog breeds that show these rise and fall patterns. And one of the things that we found about these dog breeds, and it's also true of baby names, is that the faster a breed goes up, the faster it goes down. It's no accident that labs are still popular. They went up really slow. But on the other hand, what's the classic? What's the most dramatic? The most dramatic fall was Dalmatians. Dalmatians went up like that, and they crashed just like that. Absolutely symmetrical graph. By the way, if you want to know how long these fads occur, it's almost always about 25 years. It takes about 12 or 13 years for the breed to reach its peak, and then about 12 or 13 years for it to fall back to obscurity. Well, people say, well, do movies have an effect on this? And there's anecdotal data that they do. So for example, this was the release of, this is a classic case, The Shaggy Dog. Released in 1959, 1960. All of a sudden, it absolutely took off. It increased 10,000%. Yeah, Old English Shepherd, AKC registrations increased 10,000% in about 12 years, and absolutely stunning. And then began to crash. Well, but is this just an anomaly? Well, recently, my colleagues and I did a systematic study of this. We looked at the effect of 29 dog movies, that came out between 1927 and 2005. And what we found was, sure enough, with these boom and bust breeds, there is an effect. There is a dog movie effect. That first week ticket sales of a dog movie predicted dog registrations even 10 years later. So it's a fairly long-lasting effect. It's a big effect. Of the breeds that had the biggest effect, it resulted in almost 800,000 puppy registrations. That's a hell of a lot of dogs. Interestingly enough, what we also found was that in recent years, like the last 10 or 15 years, this effect has gone down. So it's not nearly as important as it was in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. Another question, which I think is actually more interesting, and I'm really excited about this, is that we can ask the question is, well, why do things become popular anyway? And we know that some things become popular because they're better. So for example, iPhones are certainly better. In every sense, they're absolutely better than these rotary phones that some of you were probably have never even seen a rotary phone. But they're clunky old things. They only did one thing. That my iPhone can do everything, just everything. It cannot open a can of beer, but other than that, it can do just about everything else. But some things become popular for God knows what reason. For example, wearing baseball hats backwards. Why did that suddenly become popular? Why did the idea of wearing shoes that hurt your feet and make it impossible to walk straight, how did that become popular? So some things can become popular not because they have a function or because they're better. They might become popular because they're stupid, but everybody else is doing it, and you want to be just as, should I say that, just as stupid as the next guy? That's probably not right, but humans are the best copycats in the world. We're better copycats than any other animal. I think I'm pretty confident in saying that. So we were able to test this hypothesis, and we asked the question, do better breeds, and I put that better in quotes. I know some of you are going to jump on me for saying some breeds are better than others, but I'm not going to change my mind about that. So some breeds are better, are breeds that are easier to live with. Do they become more popular? So the data we use is a data that some people like, some people don't like, and that's James Serpel's SPARCS data. And this is data on owner reports on problem behaviors, mostly problem behaviors in their dogs. So he's got 80,000 some odd owner reports, internet surveys and things like that about people's dogs, all the way from stranger aggression, owner aggression, big bunch of pain in the neck behaviors there. And we're able to correlate these behaviors with indexes of breed popularity, total registrations, AKC registrations, rates of increase and rates of decrease. Now, if people are picking dogs rationally, you would expect that dogs that were better behaved, had fewer behavior problems, as reported by their owner, would become more popular. That is to say, there would be a positive correlation, substantial positive correlation between behavior problems, frequency of behavior problems, and breed popularity. We also had data on number of genetic diseases that the dog is prone to have, and we're able to look at both of these. Well, this is what we found. First of all, behaviors. We had 80 dog breeds. That's the correlation we found with behavior. You don't have to be a statistical genius to know that that's nothing. In other words, there was absolutely no correlation between a breed's behavior and whether or not it became popular or not. However, there was a correlation between genetic diseases and breed popularity. And what we found was surprising. It sure surprised me. What we found was that the more breeds had more genetic problems. There was a positive, almost a positive 0.60 correlation between breed popularity and genetic problems. So oddly, the more popular the breed, the more problems it has. And this is exemplified by this dog right here, the bulldog. Now, there may be some bulldog owners here, but I hope your veterinarian loves you if you're a bulldog owner. They are prone to a huge number of problems because of their strange way that we've bred them. Sudden death, dental problems, narcolepsy, snorting, dermatitis, joint diseases, cleft palate, and a tendency to fart a lot. So you would think that this breed would be becoming less popular if people were making rational decisions as opposed to crowd mentality decisions. This is the graph of bulldog registrations and the AKC bulldog registration in the United States. As you can see, these dogs continue to grow in popularity despite their well-known veterinary problems. Well, the most recent cultural change in dog popularity is the decline of interest in purebreds. As my friend Steve Zalestowski, who just talked, reminds me periodically. Really, I'm talking about a decline in AKC registrations. And I think that somewhat represents interest in purebreds, but I'm not ready to argue that. But what we do see is that there's been an incredible decline in registrations with the American Kennel Club. So people are simply not registering their dogs nearly now with the AKC as much as they were before. Now the question is why AKC registrations, by the way, have tanked since about 1977 when they reached their peak when about 1.6 million new puppies a year were being registered. They're down by 60 or 70% now. They're down to about 30 or 40% of what they were 15 or 20 years ago. So why is this? It's because of the rise of a new trend in dogs, and that is the moral superiority of having a rescue dog. And this is an Ngram of the frequency of when I typed rescue animal into Ngram and found that interest in rescue animals began to go up really between about 1987. All of a sudden it begins to absolutely take off. And I don't know about you, but I used to I've talked to a lot of people over the years about their dogs. And it used to be that I would say, oh, see somebody with a dog, and I'd say, tell me about your dog. And they say, oh, it's a purebred collie or a purebred pug or something like that. Nobody ever tells me that anymore. The first word out of their mouth, 90% of the time, is a sentence that has the word rescue animal in it. And we heard 2 instances of that just in the last couple of days with speakers that mentioned that their dog, they said she was a shelter dog or she was a rescue dog. So my sense is that this is actually why is the purebred boom gone bust? Well, there's the increasingly well-known problems that purebred animals have, bad publicity associated with puppy mills, and then this idea of what psychologists call moralization. The idea that a neutral behavior or a negative behavior sometimes becomes morally acceptable or even morally preferable. And I think now, if you say you've got a rescue dog because you're a good person. You're a savior. You saved that dog. So the question is, I don't know how many of these rescue dogs are actually rescue dogs, but I do know everybody now tells me that their dog is a rescue dog. So here's my take-home message from SPARCS 2015. First of all, the human-dog relationships evolved via the coevolution of genes and culture. Both of these are important. I used to think that genes were the most important thing driving it. In recent years, I've changed my mind. I've become much more of I appreciate the role of culture much more than I used to. In the last 30 years, I think we've seen a dramatically new trend with this idea of the humanization of dogs, exemplified by a New York Times editorial by a good researcher named Greg Byrne, who the title was "Dogs Are People Too," and increasingly think of dogs as people too. There are, and this is not generally recognized, but there are enormous cultural differences in how dogs are viewed and how dogs are treated in this world. I think our AKC data has shown that our choices in dogs can change, our preferences in dogs can change incredibly rapidly. They're often fads, they're often irrational, and they basically show that dogs have become forms of fashion, just like clothing becomes a form of fashion or music becomes a form of fashion. Popularity rises and falls. And then finally, my bottom line is that when we study our relationships with animals, what we really do is we learn about ourselves. And if you're interested in more of this stuff, my book, Some We Love, Some We Hate, Some We Eat, is a general view of sort of a lot of issues in anthozoology. There's a chapter on dogs, a chapter on pets, but chapters on lots of other things too. So I think it's probably a pretty good general overview of the field. And I do write, as Julie mentioned, I do write blogs called Animal Us for Psychology Today. Now, warning, my blog is not nearly as cool as Julie's brilliant blog for Scientific American. And that's it. Questions?